Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Derek Fildebrandt. Today is February 16th, and you're watching The Pipeline. I'm joined today, as usual, by co-hosts Dave Naylor, Western Standard News Editor. How you doing, Dave?
I'm doing well, Derek. Thank you.
And as always, the pleasant and sunny Cory Morgan, our opinion and broadcast editor.
Good day.
Now full opinion and broadcast editor.
Full, no wonder, there's no more assistant out of it.
Not a measly assistant. You're just the full editor.
So now I want an assistant.
How about an assistant to the assistant?
I'll see what
I'm not going to get you an assistant, but I'll get you an assistant to the assistant.
Okay, I'll take
You know who the perfect man for that job is? You.
Oh, good. I'll get another hat.
See, that's an Office reference. When they convinced Dwight to hire an assistant to the assistant regional manager.
I don't think I've seen that one, but I see where it's going.
It's a late
not
episode.
A good negotiation.
No. Okay. Well, obviously, there's a lot weighing on us on all Canadians right now very heavily. We're going to talk about what martial law means right now. We've gone through a lot of the mainstream media. They've acknowledged there's something going on. They don't acknowledge it's even martial law. They go out of their way to make sure not to reference that this is really just the renamed War Measures Act, with some important differences. There are differences, but we're going to go through what it means. There's some absolutely bonkers stuff in the detailed orders that came out from the Emergencies Act. Absolutely nutty. I can't wait to get into that. The border blockades that have come down. That's a new. I think most of them were coming down or were cleared even before the invocation of the Emergencies Act. The Coots ones come down. Doesn't seem to have actually had much to do with the Emergencies Act, but blockades coming down. We're going to talk about that. And maybe not as sexy, but I think quite important. A very interesting by-election. The Battle of Fort McMurray, or the by-election battle.
Lac La Biche, too.
I'm sorry, Lac La Biche. Don't hate on me, Lac La Biche listeners. All two of you. We got Brian Jean, who is the UCB candidate, running against Jason Kenney. Incredible situation where there's literally not a single candidate on the ballot who supports the premier of the incumbent government. I've never heard of a situation like this. Even if you're a Jason Kenney fan, you have to admit, this is a funny situation.
It's bizarre.
I've never heard of a by-election where there's literally no one on the ballot who supports the government. It's funny. All right. Well, before we get into it, I just want to thank all of our Western Standard members for your continued support. We've been so fortunate to have the level of support we have had over the last year to grow as quickly and as strongly as we have. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, please go to westernstandardonline.com/membership. You can try it free for 15 days and cancel at any time before that if you don't like it. And if you do like it, it's only $99 a year or $10 a month to support independent Western bailout-free media that is trying to give you give you news and then commentary shows like this as straight as we can. So, and of course, we got to pay the bills. So we need to acknowledge today's sponsor, Bitcoin Well. Cory, why don't you tell them about Bitcoin Well?
Well, Bitcoin Well, they are a great Alberta company. They, if you're looking at digital currencies, you're looking to get involved in it, check it out. Because a lot of people have a lot of questions, right? It's new to them. It's different. Bitcoin Well, these guys, they're based out here. They'll lead you the way to it. And they never hang on it. They're safe. People are worried about stuff, giving your money to some other service, and then they're going to hang on to it and do something for you. That doesn't happen. You control your wallet. You saw that here with, with people who use that. And they will show you how to do it. White glove service. Because, where do you start, right? Where do you begin? And their whole website will break it down. They'll help you out with it. There's one-on-one service to show you how to get into it.
Yeah.
They make it easy.
Well, everyone sitting here, Dave, Cory, myself, we're also all part of a Bitcoin savings plan, the Western Standard, to incentivize. We want our employees to actually save. So we've got a system set up where a small portion of the monthly salary of our employees is put aside. You guys put aside a certain percentage every month, and the Western Standard matches that, and it's all automatically done. Any small business owners watching or listening right now should strongly consider something like this. You can check it out at Bitcoin Well. It sounds intimidating. It sounds much more intimidating than it is. They came and they helped us. They even set up a seminar running our employees through Bitcoin Well, those who are less familiar with it, through Bitcoin itself, and then how to set up their wallets. And Bitcoin Well has absolutely nothing to do with other stuff that's going on. should just be aware, we're going to get into the Emergencies Act here. The government, regardless of the current situation, the government has now clearly demonstrated they have an ability and a willingness to seize your money. They could steal your money. You might think that these guys are bad, they should have their money stolen. Well, guess what? It might be you tomorrow. And they can't steal Bitcoin. It's even better than gold. You can bury your gold in the ground. If no one finds it, well, then they can't steal it. But with Bitcoin, they can't take it away. It's secure.
Yeah, just some clarity on that, because the government would like to get it if they could, and they can't.
But
what the government
can't.
is coming after is bank accounts and things like that, which
Yeah.
is when you're putting your money into a national institution, they can potentially get at that. They've got no way to get your wallet. No way. So,
Yeah. Well, if the government came after me today, I've only just begun building my own Bitcoin account. It's pretty new. But if the government came today and freeze my assets and stole my money, well, I'd still have a little bit of, at least I have some Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's a hedge, if nothing else.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just glad I have no money.
Yeah, we got them beat. There's nothing to take.
If you have no money, don't worry about Bitcoin because there's nothing to take. Okay. Well, I want to talk about what martial law means. We've done some breakdowns today. We've had some news stories on it. I've written a column. We know it's here, but there's some aspects to it that have been either entirely ignored by the government-funded media or maybe not given as much scrutiny as I think it deserves. Dave, why don't you kind of give us a high-level rundown?
Sure, I'm sure I'll forget some of it, but you can help me out. This is the first time the Emergencies Act has ever been used. The old War Measures Act was last used in 1970. That was during the FLQ crisis when people were getting murdered, and it was a very scary situation. I was too young to remember it. Cory's so old, he might have been out there protesting, but it was scary times.
I was
He was
still
a bomb
swimming
maker.
around in a testicle at that point.
Oh,
Scary,
One more year before I was born.
Scary. It was
family
scary.
show.
Scary times for the country at that time. Right now, we've got maybe maximum 400 truckers blockaded into downtown Ottawa. That has got the government with no clue as to what they're going to do and how they're going to get rid of them. So they brought in this Emergencies Act. It still has to be passed by Parliament. But the powers are just absolutely mind-blowing, Derek, absolutely sweeping. Like for example, the tow truck drivers, they can't find any in Alberta to help tow at Coutts, so they couldn't find any in Ottawa either. They can now order tow truck drivers to basically, at the point of a gun to go and move these trucks out of Ottawa. And if the tow truck drivers refuse, they can go to jail.
So what we're going to do, we're going to go through this stuff with you here, and then we're going to come point by point back through this, going to discuss some of these interesting
Sure.
powers and exemptions. So that is conscription, the ability the government can. So we're going through these orders today. The government or a police officer representing the government, if you want a tow truck, or even if you don't, they just need your car that day, or for some reason they want your boat, the government can come to you, man will come to you holding a gun and say, they have to issue a request. That's the funny part, is a request.
Makes it sound as if it's an option.
It's an offer you can't refuse.
Yeah.
And they can not just take your stuff and for your use, they can make you do it. And if you say no, you could go to a prison for up to 5 years.
Yeah, it's just crazy. They banned protests that they consider problematic. Just wondering what that means to the weekly marches across the country, including in Calgary, where you get thousands of people turning out. They would now be breaking the law. There's no.
Well, I should clarify. They can deem something to be an unlawful assembly if I think I'm quoting almost exactly here. If they can reasonably believe that it could breach the peace. Now, defining breaching the peace, I mean, calling Trudeau a mean name is a breach of the peace now.
Yeah.
So it depends if what we're considering breaching the peace now. But they can. All protests aren't carte blanche declared illegal, just ones that they declare illegal.
Yeah, exactly. Part of the problems with the convoys in Ottawa and the police trying to move them along is the children. Dozens of children are at, right inside the blockade. Government has now made it illegal for anybody under 18 to be within 500 meters of a protest. So they can go in and take your children if they so desire. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there about protecting infrastructure. And the list of infrastructure that they protect is incredibly long. One thing they don't protect, pipelines and logging roads. If you want to go protest or blockade a logging road or a pipeline, go ahead, because that's not problematic. Strangely, they've exempted all First Nations people and all refugees from the act.
And protected persons. I'm not sure how we're identifying
No,
that, but I guess that just means any group the Liberals like.
I don't know.
so if you're a First Nations truck driver and you go park in downtown Ottawa, that's okay. It's just weird stuff like that. They can go after your bank. You've talked about going after the bank. They can go into your bank account. What else am I missing, Derek?
Well, yeah, there is the freezing of financial assets. We kind of
Yeah.
talked about that
Yeah.
in the context of Bitcoin.
Yeah, they, as you said, they did list what they called infrastructure and made their exceptions. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go through. So first is just protesting, and that includes blockading in some aspects. Right now, there are no blockades left, though. There is just a protest around Parliament Hill. Critics call it an occupation. I mean, they are occupying a space, so sure. But generally, if you like a protest, you call them dissenters, and if you don't like a protest, you call them occupiers or rioters. So first, let's talk about that. That's the one the media have looked at generally the most, and they've said, well, look, not all protesting is not banned, just illegal protests are banned. But if you look at the orders that are issued under the Act, it says that you can protest lawfully unless it is an unlawful assembly, and an unlawful assembly is defined as an assembly defined by the government as unlawful. So it's illegal unless the government says it's illegal.
Basically, it just gives them a mountain of arbitrary power. That's at the bottom line. They can declare it anytime. They can say we've determined. I mean, with reasonable, that's always such a loaded word, right?
It's the most Canadian word, and it's used so Orwellianly.
Yeah, and anybody could claim to be reasonable with it. So if they don't like which one of them is, they will say it's not reasonably expected to keep the peace. It's now an illegal one, and they'll have that authority to do it on a drop of a hat if they get this law through.
So let's talk a bit more about conscription here. I love the language this government order uses, this order around martial law. Conscription. They don't use the term conscription. It's just called a request. So I'm an OPP officer. I'm an RCMP officer. And also, the RCMP, federal police, are now empowered to start enforcing provincial and municipal law. The federal government has subsumed provincial sovereignty over our laws. So normally, we get to decide, well, how are we going to enforce things? When are we going to enforce things? That's a provincial decision. No longer is. It's now nationalized under Ottawa. So conscription. If I'm a RCMP officer and Cory's a trucker, I walk up to him. You probably know I got a gun on me, and I say, Cory, get in your truck. Come with me. You're working for me today. You might say, no, I don't want to help you. I support the cause. Or you might just say, I've got contracts. I have other things to do today. I don't work for you. Well, at that point, I'd probably remind you of the Act. And if you still fail to comply, I can arrest you, imprison you, and you can serve up to 5 years in prison. But let's say you comply. Let's say you say, okay, fine. I'll walk away. I'll give up my conscientious objection to this, or I will abandon my other business contracts and obligations for the day, and you do come and help me. At the end of it, I could say, thank you very much for your work. The government will send you a check. You don't get to negotiate with me about how much you're going to get paid. The government just says, here's how much you're going to get paid, and that's that. Even if you would have been forced to give up other contracts that you had that day or whatever else was going on. I can't think of much like that in the history of Canada.
No, I've got a column that's going to be going up this afternoon at westernstandardonline.com, actually from a PhD philosophy student that was quite interesting. And he went through it very carefully, pointing out actually that this is by definition a form of slavery. And that's not an exaggeration. That's when you take somebody and force their labor against their will. Even if there's a bit of compensation, you could say the old slave owners fed the slaves and housed them. Mm-hmm. That was compensation. But there was no negotiation, as you said, for the number, and you had no choice in the matter. So, and he says quite clearly in the article, he's not comparing this to, of course, the days of 150 years ago in the States. But technically, That's what we got going on. Same with martial law. People get upset on social media with me using that term, but look up the definition, and it says the suspension of civil rights by a government. This is it, guys.
Mhm.
This is exactly what it is.
Well, if I compel you to do something and you don't get any say over what you get paid for it, well, that's slavery.
Yeah, I mean, just right now, I mean, I can complain and whine, but I can always get up and walk out the door.
Yeah, you have the right to not work here.
Yes, you won't be able to charge me or assault me or anything like that if we fall
I
apart.
will beat him if he tries to renegotiate his contract.
Well, okay, we're going to work on that a little bit. But you won't legally do it. So
Yeah, I would not do it with the sanction of the law.
yes. So I mean, but I mean the precedents of this are very, very disturbing and distressing. I mean, they're press gangs. You know what? If you're sitting parked idling with your tow truck and they feel you did everything better to do, they're going to pull you into service. Like this is a bizarre. And I suspect. I mean, I would say I don't know. I'm not a legal person. I won't give legal advice. But if a person said, "Geez, I've really had the sniffles today, and I think I might have COVID," it would be pretty dangerous if the state forced that person to go among other people and do their work. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's important to point out, Derek, that these martial laws are being brought in, even though there has not been a single violent incident at any of the blockades. There were the weapons found in Coots, which we'll get to later. But we've now got a story on the website today that the Parliamentary Press Gallery has been so intimidated by these truckers, they're asking for armed protection.
Mhm.
So taxpayers are now paying for armed guards to protect the Parliamentary Press Gallery. It's just the level of violence just doesn't match the level of nonviolence.
Mhm.
It's just ludicrous that they brought in all this stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, the things that were illegal are still illegal. You can't assault people, press members or not. As tempting as it may be or not, you can't do it. And the law is there for that. And we have law enforcement officers for that should be capable of doing the job.
Mhm.
As Dave was said too. I mean, the other incidents where they're having anything, borders and so on, the existing law enforcement capabilities were able to manage it.
Well, let's go on to infrastructure here. So I crashed. Your show came in because I came in all excited. I was like, "Oh my God, we found this insane crap in the emergency order here." You read off a very extensive list. I don't have it memorized, but it's a very long list of items that are protected, including bus stations, bus stops. Bus stops are considered critical infrastructure here. COVID-19 vaccination clinics. Critical infrastructure. You're not allowed to protest or block entrance to in any way those kinds of places. Not on this very extensive list was oil pipelines. Cory, why? But just hazard a guess why oil pipelines might not be included on the very otherwise extensive list of critical infrastructure that's protected.
Well, I mean, for one, we do have an ideological prime minister who just doesn't like oil pipelines anyways, so we wouldn't be sad about it. But of course, there would be a lot of sticky protesters in the First Nations communities, and the district court doesn't represent all the First Nations. We've been over that, who may choose to or might already be in the process. There's always one protest or another going on an oil pipeline, and the government does not want to feel compelled to have to deal with that. They are always scared witless of dealing with those protests, so they're making sure not only having racial aspects built into their Emergencies Act, but the ability now to protest on certain types of infrastructure, but not others. It's ridiculous.
So the logging road at the Ferry Creek site on Vancouver Island is now protected infrastructure. Now, the RCMP have made 1,200 arrests over the last several months at that site, but now there's certainly been no order for them. A full cabinet order, emergency order to clear them out.
Well, there's been acts of violence there. They've tried to starve workers from getting food in, stop them from getting heating fuel in. Those are clear acts of violence, the likes of which we've seen at none of these protests, none of these blockades.
Yeah, the Coastal GasLink blockade with the hereditary chiefs did that sort of thing too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that leads me to think, I know how the truckers can keep on protesting. I know they don't want to leave Parliament Hill. I know they don't want to leave there. But if they just turn their trucks back on, drive away from Parliament, and find the nearest oil pipeline, just protest there. You don't have to protest against the oil. Just protest against it doing its piping oil through it. It'll still bring the economy to its knees, but it's legal. You can do that.
Go block line 5.
Yeah, coming up in
Why not?
Saturday.
That's a good one.
Go block line 5. That's a wonderful idea. Okay, well, let's talk about some other funny exemptions in this. I could not believe my eyes reading through when I saw this part, but then somebody thought, this is Justin Trudeau and this is Canada. I can believe it. So Section 2 of the emergency order states that persons in the following categories are exempted from Section 1, which is pretty much all the limitations. And the first exempt category was persons defined as Indians under the Indian Act. I use the term Indian, it's kind of old school, so First Nations people, but Indian has a technical legal legislative term. So official status Indians, if you have official Indian status, you're totally exempt. None of this applies to you. You're scot-free. Then after that, there were several categories of refugees, and then vaguely defined protected persons. Cory,
We're speechless.
I know.
Hey, what do you say to this?
Yeah.
I mean, it's race-based law. I mean, we already have it. We have it with the Indian Act and a whole number of things, but like, it's just complete absurdity.
But why do you think they legitimately? Why do you think they said these groups of people, First Nations, refugees, and whatever else protected persons is? Why does this not apply to them?
They've exceeded my ability to imagine on this one. It's ridiculous. I mean, there are First Nations people out there at the protests. So, you know,
they don't have to leave.
It's not technically a First Nation protest, but there's First Nation people out there. They're citizens like everybody else. And now how are they going to parse this? How are you? Well, we're going to evict these ones, but not those ones. Show me your status card before I hit you with the truncheon. Or, you know, if you're a First Nations tow truck driver, I guess you won't have to necessarily work. It's just absurd, and I don't know what you're trying to do. It's not like there was a large element of First Nations to try and quell or exempt in this. I don't know why and where they're going with this.
I could just see the Ripleys going through, and they're looking around. Okay, is that guy a status Indian? Okay, let's beat him because there's a, you know, it's not anything close to majority, but there's a not insignificant contingent of First Nations people there, as much as some of the government press tries to ignore that that's a fact. But are they literally going to go around and start checking the color of people's skin here to see if they can be removed?
It's just a case of another example of how woke this government is, how woke Justin Trudeau is. You know, we're certainly a long way away from sunny days of 2015, aren't we?
Oh, it's just long lost. He's a vindictive, angry man. There's something wrong with him.
I'd lost faith in Canada quite a while ago, but this just shows there really is no institutional protections against tyranny in this country. You can just do anything. If you have a government, it used to be just a majority government, and Trudeau effectively has a majority government because the NDP will back him on virtually anything as long as it goes further in that more extreme direction. It's baffling to me. I was watching Tucker Carlson, his monologue last night, and he said, you know, Canada's fallen. It's gone. Like, used to be a couple months ago, we'd all chuckle at Australia. Like, look at these guys. They're back in a prison colony. Well, now who's chuckling at us?
Yeah, they didn't even implement martial law in order to do that, or an Emergencies Act, war measures, you know, all the things you want to call it. I mean, it's a suspension of civil rights that again, it's not justified, not even close.
We're a penal colony now without the nice weather. It's absolute madness. Okay, well, there's been some movement on the border blockades, Coots, Ambassador Bridge, I believe one in Manitoba. So why don't you give us an update, Dave?
Sure. There was an RCMP release on Monday, I believe, about a cache of weapons being discovered in Coots. Not an insignificant amount of weapons either. Handguns, what looked like automatic.
They were not. No, those were
semi-automatic weapons, body armor. This was 11 people were arrested. Nobody from the truckers group really knows who they were. They weren't part of the. They weren't part of the overall group. They just came in. They were obviously interlopers. You know, had their own.
Yeah, our reporters who have developed pretty close relationships and know people on the ground here. According to all of our sources, the protesters on the ground, or the blockaders, whatever you want to call them, they didn't know who any of these people were.
No. Right after the announcement, the real convoy organizers down there met And I think they got the sense that hey, we've lost sort of moral high ground with this now. We cannot be associated with this type of action. So they decided to remove their barricades. So they came down. The one in Emerson, it came down this morning. The final trucks left there, and the Ambassador Bridge was cleared out fairly easily and without drama on Saturday or Sunday morning on the weekend. So right now there are no border blockades in the country. The only protest going on, the only major protest going on is the one in Ottawa. But as Cory said on his show today, this is the weekend to get out there and show your support for the convoy and your disdain for martial law that people have to take to the streets.
Yeah, peacefully. I mean, we've been doing it right so far, and it has been shaking up the government. It has. I mean, they're shaken. They're panicked. And they're panicked by peaceful protest. We can keep peacefully pressuring these guys. Don't let this, in my view, I mean, this is my activist coming out. I'm going out this weekend. I'll be out this Saturday. I'll find a protest, and I'll be.
Well, and that's how you keep the moral high ground. I mean, as soon as you start acting like BLM goons and going around breaking windows, lighting something on fire, you lose the moral high ground.
Yeah,
and those guys might get a pass. I mean, those guys can burn down cities in the United States, hence declared mostly peaceful. And guys who are supporting lifting restrictions can set up a hot tub at a bouncy castle, and it's called a Nuremberg rally.
And the ones in Kurtz, as Dave said, they're reasonable. I mean, they saw the other stuff that, oh man, okay, this is getting beyond our control. This isn't what we wanted to start.
Yeah.
We don't want violence. We don't want problems. You know what? We can't seem to separate the wheat from the chaff here, so we're just going to disband this one. I don't think they're done protesting. They're just done with that.
Yeah.
They're
I
finished.
think you'll see rolling convoys, down at the border. They wouldn't stop. They wouldn't blockade. They could just drive in slowly in circles.
Yeah. There's lots of things to be done.
Well, they can do it around major cities and things like that. There are things that I don't think we've seen the last of them. I think the freedom block convoys, which became freedom blockades, are probably become just convoys again.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there's less opportunity in a convoy for someone who's looking for trouble, like these guys who got busted with a. I always like it when the press say a large cache of guns and ammunition, and I'm like, it's not that much. But I mean, like it was
the context of where it was is distressing.
Yeah, it was. It's not more than I'd take out to shoot a goose with or something. It was.
You wouldn't shoot a goose wearing body armor.
I've had some pretty mean geese. You ever fought a goose?
I know they're mean.
They are mean
They're mean. I always wear full body armor when I go goose hunting. Okay. Well, speaking of goose hunting, our other sponsor today is the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. The CSSA is a killer organization. I've been a member of them for over a decade. These guys are also in Ottawa. Maybe not quite so physically making a presence, but they make their voice loud and clear, speaking for all law-abiding firearms owners in Canada. These guys launch legal challenges against crazy arbitrary laws coming from the Liberal government. These guys conduct advocacy campaigns to educate Canadians and Westerners on what is good and reasonable firearms policy in the country. They have done so much to support your right to own, purchase, and safely use firearms in Canada. Without these guys, I think we'd have a lot more legal guns owned safely by safe firearms owners in Canada, and a lot more guns on the streets in the hands of criminals. I think we owe them a lot. So I'd encourage you guys, do what I've done over a decade ago. Go and join the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. What's the URL?
CSSA-cila.org. See, I didn't even have to look at the screen for that.
I saw what you did. Anyone from the CSSA is watching this, please change your URL.
But a good Google.
Just Google
people
it.
search things nowadays rather manually type most often. So
yeah,
Canada Shooting Sports Association, you'll find them.
Yeah, absolutely great organization. Great sponsor of the show. We appreciate them, of course, and check them out. Sign up. Be worth your time. Fort McMurray. You know what? Screw you, Laklabish. I've got it out for you. I'm sorry. I love Laklabish. Okay. It's a French name. I don't know why they have to say a French name. I know. Anyway, before I get in trouble, let's move on.
It's your turn to get in trouble on here for a change.
Who's going to discipline me? It's the whole reason I started to stand back up. No one can tell me what to do. Okay, so by-elections are often interesting, some more than others. Normally, a by-election in a safe seat for any party is not that interesting. The most interesting by-election in the recent history of Alberta has a familiar name. Had a familiar name in it in I think 2009 or 10. A guy by the name of Paul Hinman. He was the outgoing leader of something called the Wild Rose Party at the time. He ran in Calgary, Glenmore, and out of nowhere, he defeated the PCs. The PCs fell from first to third, Liberals second. Paul Hinman entered as the first Wild Rose Party member of the legislature. He's since lost the seat after. He's now the leader of the Wild Rose Independence Party. And so he's running there. So we'll get to him in a bit, but that's just kind of teeing up that there is a history of some interesting by-elections. And the most interesting guy for the most interesting by-election is running in this one too. But Dave, why don't you tell us what also makes this by-election so interesting?
Well, the fact that the UCP candidate wants to remove Kenney from power. As you said, Derek, unprecedented in our history. Brian Jean has been running a snark campaign, or whatever you want to call it, for months now.
4 years.
4 years. 4 years. You remember he lost the leadership race for the UCP to Jason Kenney.
Mm-hmm.
So he won the nomination up there in the UCP colors. So now you've got a candidate for a party, the governing party, who wants the leader removed. Very, 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 very strange. You mentioned Paul Hinman. I think secretly Jason Kenney would probably hope the NDP would win over Brian Jean. I had an exclusive interview with the Premier late last week, and I asked him, any plans to go out there for the UCP candidate and do some campaigning? No. The short answer was basically.
I listened to the audio of that after. He didn't say the word no, but it was a lot of, well, I haven't thought that far ahead, and my schedule's full, and
got a budget to prepare, and a throne speech.
I got to see a man about a horse.
Yeah, you can take it to the bank that you're not going to see Jason Kenney in Fort McMurray or Lacklavich during the campaign. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be March 15th is the vote date. So
we're not even going to talk about the NDP candidate here. I could be wrong, but the NDP is not going to win there. But you've got, I guess, so there's the Alberta Party doesn't have a candidate yet, but the media obsessed about the Alberta Party. They're just consistently a nothing. The Liberals, I don't know if they're even they're only technically alive.
I think David Kahn has just got the casket that far closed on it before he left the leadership of the Liberals.
No, I think it's already got nails. So the question is, have they encased it in a pyramid yet?
Yeah, cement sarcophagus.
Yeah. So forget them. Then the Alberta Advantage Party.
Marilyn Burns is running up there as well.
Something.
There's only 10
or 11 votes. Yeah.
Only 2 to worry about.
Yeah.
Well, there's 3 that are worth concerning over it all. The UCP with Brian Jean. There's an NDP candidate. I think she's a school teacher or something. I don't recall her name. And then Wild Rose is Paul Hinman. I don't realistically think Paul is likely to win there. In another circumstance, he might be able to. But when you've got all 3 significant candidates who are all opposed to Jason Kenney, the Wild Rose Party is opposed to him from the right, the NDP is opposed to him from the left, and Brian Jean is opposed to him from inside the UCP. If you're anti-Jason Kenney, you've got so many votes, places to cast your vote. So, Cory, do you think that just takes too much of the wind out of Wild Rose's sails to be able to capitalize there? If you could vote UCP and still vote against Kenney?
Yeah, it makes it very tough. I mean, when I worked on that campaign when Paul won back in 2010, and the theme of it was send Ed a message. It was about Ed Stelmach.
Yeah.
And you only had one real solid candidate to do that. You had Diana Collier-Urquhart and Paul Hinman. And then you started getting Liberal and the NDP beyond that. But if you were conservative, you were discontent with the leadership, you had that option to put that vote towards, and that's what happened. They went to Paul. And in this case, as you said, the discontented UCP members know that the middle finger they could send Kenny might even be bigger by voting for the UCP than by voting for Paul. And that's what makes this so bizarre. And it makes it more difficult for Paul to carve a wedge. The only thing that stands out, though, is Paul is a tireless campaigner. He's been up there for a month and some already.
Yeah.
He's been beating those doors. He works the ground like nobody else. But if you aren't getting that public feel and attention and media, it's going to be very difficult for him to surpass it. I mean, I never like to underestimate it, but it's going to be a tough one.
Well, let's play a fun scenario. Let's assume that Brian Jean wins. What does Kenny do?
I don't know. I'm astounded that he is the official candidate. Okay.
Yeah, you said he was
we
going to
talked
lose.
a while back.
No, I
You
didn't say
said
it was going to
never
lose.
gonna happen.
No, I said it was never going to happen.
Right.
And technically, I'm not yet wrong.
No, we got 28 days now.
Yeah, no. Technically, it looks unlikely to happen, but technically, Kenny at any moment he can just not sign his papers. He can fire him as the UCP candidate and appoint his own. Now, Jean would then run as an independent, and then we're splitting the vote. God knows how many ways. Who knows what happens? Then maybe Paul's got a chance, and then maybe the NDP's got a chance.
Well,
Maybe, who knows?
there's a lot of babies.
I don't think that's likely to happen. It just knowing Kenny, there was not a single candidate on the UCP ticket in the last election who did not have his personal blessing. Some of them were not his very first choices, but he was at least okay with all of them. Most of them were even his first choices. But Gene was puts him in such a weird position because if he would have discounted or disqualified Gene from being allowed to run for the UCP nomination, well, then Gene would have run as an independent or maybe Wild Rose, who knows, and very possibly won there. They were counting on their candidate. What was his name?
I can't remember, but yeah.
Joshua.
Anyway,
Yeah.
the favored Kenny candidate, recruited by Casey Madu, they thought he was going to win, and then he didn't.
And he got not just lost, he got smeared in the nomination. I mean, he just got totally annihilated. It wasn't a close.
Yeah. So, what does Kenny do? I mean, it's such an insane.
And the timing couldn't be any worse either. So that assuming it's Brian Jean, the thing is, no matter what happens, whoever wins this by-election, Jason Kenney still loses. He's the guaranteed loser. NDP, in that long shot that gets in, freaks out all the UCP voters to say, if we keep Kenny, we're getting Notley back. If Paul wins, it's saying the UCP, again, almost similarly, is so split with the right and everything, we're going to get Notley back. And if Jean wins, well, then you've got this thorn in Kenny's butt. 3 weeks from Kenny's leadership review, he's screwed.
I'm projecting right now, Kenny loses the by-election.
There's a safe prediction.
Oh,
But you had a point, Dave. I want to pick this up. I think his least losing option is the NDP. If Wild Rose is highly unlikely, but let's just say hypothetically, because they'll probably place respectably, but probably not going to be enough to win anything like that. But if they won, well, then you have a visible representation of the Wild Rose back in the legislature in the face of the United Conservative Party. It shows that they'd be hemorrhaging support to the right. It would further damage his leadership. People could say, look, we can't do this again. You got to go.
and send a message to the feds.
And send a message to the federal conservatives and federal liberals would all be very worried about that. Brian Jean wins. Well, we just talked about that. I mean, you'd have a bull in the china shop of caucus. He's not just another dissenter like some of the current MLAs who are unhappy and want to change out the leadership. You'd have Brian Jean elected on a mandate to get rid of him right before leadership race. The NDP, well, it was unlucky. Bob Rose split the vote, and this just shows why Bob Rose got to go away. We got to unite. What are your thoughts? What's the best case?
I think that is the best case. One more NDP. That's why governments tend not to win by elections overall.
Well, except in safe seats, and this was a safe UCP seat. They were in the high 60s or 70s when they won this.
Yeah. I think Kenny just may go bury his head in a pillow and go into the fetal position on March 15th. There is really no good scenarios.
No, I haven't looked into when is the legislative session scheduled. Because
I'm guessing that if I'm going to guess, I don't even know if they've said yet. What I'm going to guess, it's not until after the leadership review is over. There's no way Kenny is going to be
Yeah.
dealing with the legislature while he's fighting for his job.
Well, that's what I mean. So I mean, the thing is, you can still keep it. I guess try and keep it a little quiet while Gene is in, assuming it's him. It's not in the legislature, sitting amongst your caucus. I mean, basically whispering in each ear and starting the caucus revolt. You won't have those.
I wonder if there's any tricks he can play to prevent him from being sworn in until the legislature comes back, and therefore not be an official member of the caucus.
I think
Possible.
one of the spokes in the spanner in the wheel is the budget. We're going to have a good news budget because of the soaring oil prices.
Mhm.
Kenny's going to have money to throw around, and I'm going to assume he wants to do that before April 9th.
Yeah, so he would have to bring the legislature back in to do that.
Yeah. Well, actually, no. Governments can announce things all the time. You can announce things. You just
Yeah.
can't necessarily. Actually, if they want to get good news out, they can leak it. That's a great way to do it. If you're watching right now, yeah, Premier Kenny, if you're watching right now and you want to get this budget news out before the legislature comes, just give us a call.
Sure.
Yeah.
We had a nice chat last week.
Actually, I thought it was an amicable interview. I thought it was very interesting. Got some questions he's probably not used to getting from the mainstream press.
Exactly.
Okay, well, let's wrap it up there, Dave and Cory.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Always a slice. And thank all of you for joining us today. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, please go to westernstandardonline.com. Sign up for 15 days free trial. If you don't like it, you can cancel at any time. If you do like what you're getting, it's only $10 a month or $99 a year for unlimited access to Western Standard content, supporting independent, bailout-free Western media. Thank you all very much for your time and for joining us today. God bless.